Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to introduce to you Soumyadeep Mukherjee. And he is an international student pursuing his PhD. He's a PhD candidate in public health at Florida International University. For all you non-Floridians, that's in Miami. And he, largely through his leadership, the group has been awarded from the Secular Student Alliance for outstanding activism for an incredible event that they put on. He's an incredible activist. He's incredibly educated and has a whole slew of degrees from India as well. So honestly, one of the most brilliant people you'll find at this conference. Without further ado. Let me clip it on you, actually.
Thank you. Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. It has been a wonderful experience in this conference so far. And compared to what some of the wonderful presentations and the experiences that you have heard, you might feel that what I am going to talk about, we all are familiar with. It is more or less things that we all know or we all do. So how many in this room have participated in any kind of online activism? That's great. Yeah, in this age, more or less, we all are in some way involved with online activism. So this is an outline of my presentation, but I will focus more on the examples rather than, because I am not qualified enough to talk about what activism is and what are the criteria and all that kind of stuff. So in very simple words, activism is action on behalf of a cause, and that brings us to a very important topic. What qualifies as activism depends on the context, it depends on the time and place. For example, a woman driving a cab in the United States is not a big issue, but if the same incident takes place in, let's say, Saudi Arabia, it would be a big deal. Similarly, talking about gay rights, at least at this point, may not be a big issue in the United States, but if I talk about that in India, it would be a big issue because there same-sex is still criminalized and penalized. So some of the popular methods of activism are public protests and persuasions like demonstrations, rallies, meetings, non-cooperation like disobeying social customs, international trade embargoes, non-violent interventions like non-violent occupation of a place, and lastly, violent action is more often known as armed struggle rather than activism. It depends on how you qualify it. And so what is online activism? And we have a slew of different synonyms: cyber activism, hashtag activism. There are some even a little bit derogatory terms like clicktivism, slacktivism. It involves the use of digital tools and the electronic media to advance social and political changes. And more often than not, it is the means to an end and not an end in itself. So it is a way to organize actual activism, actual actions that are taking place on ground. Some of the benefits of online activism is that it has the power to connect with a larger community and globalize a campaign's goals. So an incident that is taking place in, let's say, in somewhere in the Indian subcontinent or in the Middle East, within a few minutes the news can spread all over the world. That's the power of online activism. So before we move further, how many are familiar with this guy? Okay, his name is Wael Ghanim. He is an Egyptian. He is associated with the Egyptian revolution. He was born in Egypt, and he was a marketing executive of the Google based in Dubai. Now he started an online campaign called We Are All Khalid Said. Now this is not a particular example of secular activism, but this was a broader, in a broader sense, this brought about the Egyptian revolution, so, or the Arab Spring in Egypt as we know about it, and he is the author of this book. So there were millions of likes in this page within a few days, and a lot of people herald him as the hero of the Egyptian revolution, although he is very humble and he says that I am not a hero. The real hero are the people on the streets who get beaten up, who get imprisoned, although he himself was also imprisoned for nearly 2 weeks. Some of the tools for online activism are online petitions. We are all familiar with change.org, avaz.org, social networks, blogs, microblogging sites such as Twitters, and cell phones and proxy servers. Now, talking about online petitions, there are some examples. For example, this is a petition requesting more diversity and support of feminism in the secular community. I think this was somewhere in 2012. This is a petition requesting the schools of British Columbia to keep the schools secular. For online petitions and online activism, a wonderful resource is movements.org, and they describe themselves as connecting dissidents in closed societies with individuals around the world who have the skills to help. This is another example of a petition, and let me give you a very brief background. Now, a lot of the examples most of the examples that I am going to give are from the developing world. And why does that matter? We are here in the United States. Now, in my opinion, and there are two things that know no borders. One of them are disease agents like bacteria and viruses. So that's why we are worried when there is an Ebola outbreak in Africa or an avian influenza in China. And same applies to religious fundamentalism. Because what I feel is fundamentalism of one religion feeds fundamentalism of another religion. It is very easy for Christian fundamentalists to say, look at the guys in the Middle East. If we are not strong, how will we defend our homes? It is like the same argument, like we need nuclear weapons to combat nuclear weapons. And whenever we have seen that whenever there is a lot of Islamic fundamentalism, that strengthens Christian fundamentalism, that strengthens Hindu fundamentalism in India, and these things. So we need to be aware of these events. So very recently, since February, there have been a spate of assassinations of freethinkers in Bangladesh. Now, I am from India, and I am from that part of India where we speak Bengali. And Bengali is again the national language of Bangladesh, which is our neighboring country. So I personally am very much affected by these events, irrespective of whether they're in India or Bangladesh. And this guy, Dr. Abhijit Roy, he was a software engineer, and this is his wife. So they were both based in the United States. Alongside his main job, Dr. Roy was a wonderful online activist. And I will show his blog in a few slides. So he ran a blog where he promoted free thinking. He read the complex books related to evolution, related to the purpose of life, complex questions like homosexuality and all that. And he would write blogs in Bengali and some in English, describing those in very layman's terms so that everyone can understand. Now, he received a lot of threats on Facebook, but he never took them seriously. In the month of February, he traveled to Dhaka, which is the capital of Bangladesh, and he and his wife were attacked by a bunch of assailants. He was hacked to death, Dr. Roy, and his wife was seriously injured. She lost a thumb. And I'll come back to that later. So these are some of the social networks that we can use. For example, Instagram, what a wonderful thing that is, that we can upload a short video or a few images, and we can share it all over the world. For example, when we had the Charlie Hebdo shootings, there were support pouring in from all over the world. People expressed their solidarity with the people who had murdered and with the cartoonists. Now, I apologize for this graphic image, and this might look like a badly enacted scene from a cheap movie, but this is a real life photo. The incident that I just described, this is Dr. Abhijit Roy lying in a pool of blood, and this is his wife asking for help in the streets of Dhaka. This is another photo of the same incident. And these photos can send a very powerful message of a brutality and share the news all over the world. I would request people to look at this video. This is the same person, Dr. Abhijit Roy's widow, Dr. Ahmed. She had a message for the American atheists. Now, we hear a lot of cliches like wounded tiger and wounded tigress. If you hear to her talks and her speeches, it really seems that she is an wounded tigress right now. She has lost the thumb of one of her hands. She has lost her dearest friend and husband, and yet she is always up for this secular and atheistic cause. She lectures all over the world, and she is still recovering from the impact of that incident. So in response to all that, we at Florida International University organized an event, and again, to come back to social media as a tool for organizing events, we received a very good response. Usually we have a lukewarm response for the events, and in our university, not a great response to secular events. But this one, there are a lot of faculty and students were also interested, and we put together this event. We are Abhijit, please join us to uphold the spirit of free speech. This is a photo. This is Michael, is there, and Michael was our ex-president, this guy. And this person is also from Bangladesh, and he is a minority in Bangladesh, so he is very severely impacted mentally, because he also writes blogs. And he was telling that he couldn't concentrate on his exams and studies because he always gets nightmares. Like even now he gets nightmares that someone is, and he has received a lot of threat also. So he's like, I'm not going back. So Kara encouraged us to submit a brag it up, and we did. And Secular Student Alliance was kind enough to recognize that incident. We were very proud of that. One important thing that I want to emphasize is the power of cover photos and profile pictures. It might seem like a silly thing, but the reason I feel it is very powerful is because we all like ourselves the most. We all love to see our own photos on Facebook. We change them all the time, count the number of likes, the comments. Now when for a moment or for a few days we are prepared to put another person's photo in place of us, that sends a very powerful message, because for a while we are setting aside our ego, our own love for ourselves, and focusing on another individual or a greater cause. The irony of this photo is, so this guy was murdered in 2013 in Bangladesh, hacked to death. These two elderly gentlemen, they are Indians. They were shot by Hindu fundamentalists in India. This is Dr. Abhijit Roy, who was hacked to death in February. Washikur Rahman was hacked in March. Now after this guy was hacked, I made this thing very clumsily, and of course this guy was not yet there, and I put this question mark, who is next? Now I really was not expecting an answer so soon. Unfortunately, in May, I don't know, they were probably resting in April. That's why they could not murder anyone. So this was in March. In May, this guy was again hacked to death. So even now, if you look up my profile on Facebook, this is my cover photo. And I think sometimes we all do, we all put up these profile pictures for a particular day or a cause. We had this for Openly Secular Day. This is another example I seen in some people's profiles. The power of YouTube videos, we all know. This is an introduction to Openly Secular Week from Richard Dawkins. We have a bunch of them, and many of us uploaded our own videos into YouTube. This is one that I did, and I am sure many of us have also. Coming to blogs, these are some of the many blogs that are out there, and I am sure there are a lot more. And nowadays we don't have time often to read the long blogs if they are really long enough, but some people have the habit of following blogs very religiously, and I am intentionally using that word. So this is that particular blog that I am talking about. Its name is Mukto Mona, which means free thinking in Bengali. And most of these blogs were in Bengali, but there are some English ones also. And actually Dr. Abhijit Roy also wrote a few pieces with the Center for Inquiry. His last piece is named as The Virus of Faith, which is available if you Google The Virus of Faith. So yeah, I mean, this blog apparently ruffled a lot of feathers, and he kept on receiving threats, but this blog is even now, this is running. This is another person, Dr. Taslima Nasreen. So she freaks out a lot of people in Southeast Asia, because imagine, like, in addition to being atheist and secular, she's a feminist, and that's unimaginable in countries like that. Like, she is so annoying to people. They kicked her out of Bangladesh, and I'm glad that they kicked her out, because otherwise she would have been murdered. And for a while she was in Calcutta, a place in India, and there also there were a lot of protests. So nowadays she has like a permanent visa for the United States and a lot of European countries. So she keeps on moving from one place to another. She could not go back to her country when her mom died and things like that. She is also a very powerful writer, and she has a very popular quote. She is that, "I did not become an atheist by reading any work of any atheist activists or bloggers. I became atheist by reading the Quran." So, and again, this is also a fabulous example of online activism. During the Openly Secular Week, many people uploaded their experiences, sharing about the coming out as openly secular to 2 or more, or as many people as you can. Now, one of the fundamental questions about online activism is it effective? If you like something, does that mean you really care about it? And this was a very interesting article, #activism and its limits. The Guardian also published an article called "It's easy to click, but just as easy to disengage." So there are thousands of things that we like and that we share, sometimes comment, and sometimes we sign online petitions, but we are not serious about all of them, and that is true. But I think the situation is nicely summarized in this quote. It is that, of course, it is not as effective perhaps as on real life activism, and they are complementary to each other, but it is certainly better than doing nothing. So the worst that I could do is not do anything. But in addition, instead of that, if I share something, if I put a cover photo, a profile picture, and at least there are 5 people who ask me, and if 2 people remember what that is certainly better than doing nothing. And that online activism is effective is perhaps best. The best proof for that is people are getting killed for that. So imagine these people like Dr. Abhijit Roy. They were not even like fiery speakers. They were very polite, soft spoken. Like, if you ever talk to them, probably you couldn't even hear their voices. But they were so methodical in their approach and their thought processes, and they were so logical in what they wrote that people got threatened to the extent that they had to kill them. And apparently there is a list of like 90 something bloggers in Southeast Asia whom the fundamentalist groups are planning to finish one after the other. So with that, I would like to thank you. If you have any questions.
I know that FIU is in a very international is part of it, but it's also in a very international area of the country because Miami is this huge place for immigrants.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for places that aren't as diverse to bring interest into online activism, especially regarding secular people on an international level?
What I have found is that people are usually more drawn towards specific causes that they are interested in. What they don't realize is that all of these causes might have a secular connection, but they are not willing to see that broader picture. Let me give you an example. Even in such an international place, the interests are often very narrow and very focused. For example, there is a group called Society for Justice in Palestine, and they are very active again in the Israel-Palestine issue and all that stuff, which is very good and which is necessary. But that is what they are interested in. So their world is about Palestine. So if you ask them about what in Saudi Arabia, what about the human rights issues in Saudi Arabia, what about something that is going on, they don't care. So that's it. So that is one of the problems that I find with a lot of these activisms. But still, what I have found is SSA, if somehow we can make ourselves useful. So the way we got involved with this, for example, the Dr. Abhijit Roy issue, I personally knew about that incident, but the SSA as such was not planning anything to do anything about it. Some faculty and students from Bangladesh, and I know them personally, so we were discussing about what can be done. So we were planning to put up a protest. But to organize a protest and a table, to do a tabling kind of stuff, we need an official permission. For that we need a banner of a club. So and I kind of grabbed that opportunity because, and on one hand I am interested in that cause very much, and also I thought that was a wonderful way to make ourselves useful, because sometimes people think that we are only discussing philosophical stuff, God and no God, and all that kind of things. What is the application in real life? This is something that people could see, and usually instead of secularism or atheism, if we talk about human rights, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, some people, we can get some more people instead of fewer people.
Thank you.
Any other question? Thank you.